Welcome to HTML, CSS and JavaScript. This course is the first in a series of courses which make up the full stack web development specialization. So this quick presentation, you'll appreciate some context for the course, and also you'll know what you have to develop for the 3 assessment tasks on the course. So first, some context. The internet. Well, the internet is comprised of many servers and many browsers which grab information from the servers and then display them. This course is focused on the left-hand side, the browser. So if we regard the browsers and the servers as a series of layers, this particular course is focused on this 3rd layer, which is shown in brown and is labeled as client-side code. That's what we're focused on in this first course. Now, if we add extra skills from other courses, then we'll understand the right-hand side, which is server, and also upper left side, jQuery, Bootstrap, AngularJS, and a lot of other things as well. But those are all in other courses. This first course is focused on the bottom left corner, CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. Let's zoom in on that diagram a bit more, and we get this. So HTML is the visual layer, text, image, video, how we create the things that the person sees who's looking at a browser. Above HTML we have CSS. CSS sets the display rules and other types of rules for HTML. On the right hand side we have JavaScript. JavaScript can change any CSS or HTML at any time. These are the 3 technologies we focus on in this, our first course in the full stack web development specialization. So let's have a quick look at the 3 assessment tasks that you have to do on the course. The first one looks like this. It is a web page for a dating website company. You have to build this using HTML and CSS, and there's a few interactive elements as well. For our second assessment tasks, it is a guessing game, and this introduces us to functions and loops and variables, all the typical things that you have with any programming language. We use those to make a guess the color guessing game. For our third assessment task, it is also mainly based on JavaScript, and it is a little bit harder than the previous 2 tasks. And for this you have to build a find the missing face kind of game. This game has a series of levels. As you finish one level, it gets harder and you go to the next level. So that's a quick overview of context for the course and also the 3 main assessment tasks for the course.
Welcome to the full stack web development specialization. The internet and the web was hardly known to the general public as recently as 2 decades ago.
Absolutely, and in the last 5 or 10 years alone there have been huge developments. If we consider browser technologies, we have HTML for text display, CSS for styling, and JavaScript for intelligence and behavior management. All of these have had huge developments very recently.
Websites are increasingly becoming web applications. Added to that, people are using mobile devices to access the internet increasingly. All this means that we need to have multi-platform support, and this is where server-side support for targeting multiple platforms is becoming very crucial.
And that's why we've developed our full stack web specialization. The ultimate goal is to develop a capstone project which includes web, mobile, and server-side components all working together seamlessly. To achieve that, we have a series of courses. The first course teaches you HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then we move on in the second course to jQuery and the Bootstrap framework.
In the third course, we will cover web applications using AngularJS. In the fourth course, we will look at multi-platform mobile application development using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, using platforms like Cordova and the Ionic framework. In the fifth course, we will move on to the server side to look at Node.js and Node.js frameworks and MongoDB. All this will lead you to the capstone project, where you will make use of the skills that you learned over the 5 courses to develop a web, mobile, and backend support based project.
So now we have a series of videos exploring HTML. Now, HTML is essential for any web developer. You have to have a good understanding of it before you can move on to JavaScript and other things which use HTML. So it's a little bit dry, perhaps, a little bit kind of boring even, but you have to appreciate it before you can start building using it. So how do we learn HTML? Well, I have a series of slides. The slides give the background knowledge of HTML. And also there's lots of examples which we go through. All those examples are available on the website. And at the end, there's an assessment task which explores your understanding of CSS and HTML. Now, what about if you already know some HTML, which is quite common? Lots of people pick up different pieces of HTML. Well, if I was you, I would check the start of each video. I would check the slide which says, after this presentation, you will know about, and then you'll know the target of that video. Also, in the first few slides, there's a list of HTML elements and attributes, and also style properties, which are discussed in that video. So if I was you, I'd probably check those slides. If you know all of those things written, then that's a good sign you could skip the video. But if you don't know, it's probably an indicator that you should stick with the video and go through it. Here's an example of the kind of thing that you'll see. This is just a list of elements, and this is a list of style properties. So this is the kind of list you'll see near the start of each presentation. All right, so let's look at HTML in a kind of overview way first before we start diving into the details. So after this presentation, you'll understand the ways in which HTML is used. You'll appreciate the single page application idea of using HTML, and you'll be able to differentiate between HTML and another language called SVG. So HTML, basically the main language for building web pages. It's been around for quite a long time, 25, 30 years, since the 1990s. Latest version is HTML5. This complete series of videos looks at HTML5. So before we start looking at HTML code, we need to just understand how it gets used. This is the most common way it gets used. Browser sends a request to the server and asks for a web page, okay, such as index.html. Okay, server sends the complete web page back to the browser. Browser receives the complete web page and displays it appropriately. Okay, so that's been going on for like 30 years. That's the basic model, and it still goes on today millions of times a day. However, things have got a bit more complex in the last 10 or so years. Let's look at another model, which is single page application, SPA. So now things are a little bit more complex. Browser sends a request to the server asking for a small piece of data. It doesn't ask for an entire web page. It just asks for a small piece of data. For example, let's say you have an application for buying and selling stock information, stock prices, things like that. So you want to buy some stock. You send a little piece of information, you send a request to the server, I want to buy some stock. The server responds with a small piece of data, and that comes back to the browser. It comes back to the same page, single page application. So you don't get like a flash and a new web page. You don't get that at all. Most of it stays the same. Just a little piece changes. So a little piece gets sent back to the browser, and then in here, usually some JavaScript will receive the little piece of information and then update it. Perhaps it is, what is the price of some stock market information? Okay, it just updates that little price shown in the web page. So this is the single page application idea. Requesting for a little piece of data, receiving a little piece of data, changing a small piece of the web page. That is now very, very common. Now, when we say web page, perhaps you think only of HTML. So I'd like to just give a quick example of an alternative. So instead of just doing everything in HTML, you could choose SVG. Okay, it's another way of writing a display system which you give to a browser. Browser makes a nice display, and then you can interact with that display. So it's a simple example here, SVG, and then here's some text, and here's some other text, and the result is this. This is exactly what that code looks like. Is it HTML? No, zero HTML, pure SVG. So if you want to, you could write a complete web system, lots of web pages, you add JavaScript, all of that stuff, purely using SVG. Totally, you could do that. Now, here's another example in case you think that's too simple, a bit more complex. Again, we're still staying with SVG for this. My web page is so awesome. It's got a nice gradient in the background. It's got a few circles, whatever you want. That is a bit more complex SVG example. And it can do things which is a bit of trouble if you try and do them in HTML, like these kind of circles and curves. You can do them in HTML, but not an easy situation. SVG is much better for that kind of thing. All right, so there is alternatives to HTML. Quick comparison, well, SVG, very focused on graphics. In fact, the G of SVG, scalable vector graphics. So it tells you it's really focusing on the graphics side of things. On the negative side, there aren't many libraries with SVG. So for example, you want to do mobile phone applications and so on, you wouldn't really choose SVG. Okay, you would go for the thing which has been around for like 30 odd years, HTML. Okay, it doesn't have such fantastic graphics as SVG. It really has a kind of fundamentally text approach to what it does, but it has millions of libraries, and you're trying to develop something advanced, you know, mobile phone, multi-tablet kind of system. You really don't have too much choice, and you really have to go for HTML. So now let's begin to explore HTML. So after this presentation, you'll be able to build a simple web page, and also you'll appreciate the use of an HTML editor. Here's some of the HTML elements we're going to look at. So first thing is HTML is defined by a particular group of people called the World Wide Web Consortium. So there is a particular place on the internet where you can go and you can see all the information about HTML. And I strongly recommend you don't go there. All right, unless you're kind of expert, you're really already quite proficient in HTML, all of that detail there, because there's a lot of detail, is really too much. It's not about learning, it's about referring to the HTML standard. So this might be useful later after you build more HTML skills, but right now I would suggest don't go there. So let's look at HTML. HTML commands are called elements. Each element has a start tag and an end tag. So this is the paragraph element. There's the start of the paragraph, there's the end of the paragraph, and there's some text, which I haven't shown, in the middle of the paragraph. Okay, that's the usual structure, start, end, something in the middle. However, there are some exceptions which we'll look at later. So let's begin to make a web page. This is the basic structure of a web page. You have to have doc type HTML at the top, then you start your HTML element, and down the bottom you finish your HTML element, and then you have a head section, and then you have a body section. Okay, so this head section is basically some kinds of information which you don't see on the web page. The body section is more things that you actually see on the web page. So our first web page, there's the complete source code. And we've done the things that we saw on the last slide, and we've added a few extra things. A couple of extra things in the head section, a couple of extra things in the body section as well. This is what it looks like. My web page. Web page is so awesome. Very simple. That is the H1. That is the P that we saw, paragraph. So we saw H1, the top thing, and we saw P, the paragraph. So H1 is heading 1. Again, start tag, end tag, some text in the middle, basic structure of most HTML elements, and also paragraph, start paragraph, end paragraph, and then some text in the middle. Basic commands that you'll see on many web pages. Now, let's look for a few slides. Let's look at the head part. The stuff that we just talked about, H1 and paragraph, was in the body part. What about the head part? So basically, anything in the head part is information about the web page. Usually you don't actually see those things in the web page. So I had two things in my simple demonstration web page, and one was title and one was meta tag. Obvious what they do. Title tells the browser what the title is of the web page, and the meta tag obviously tells the browser the author. So pretty simple. High-level information about the web page goes in the head part. Other things you might find in the head part. You might see a style instruction. We'll talk about style a bit later. You might see a link to a style sheet, which is a separate file containing style information. You might see other types of meta information, maybe description, keywords, maybe character set. Lots of different types of meta information you might see in a web page head section. Other things you might see, a piece of JavaScript code, that might be in the head. A link to a file which has JavaScript code. JavaScript, we talk about that later. Okay? You might see a base instruction, and that's basically saying you have a website, a whole group of web pages. Where are they going? Where do they belong? And it tells the browser where they belong. So quite a lot of things that you might see in the head section. So we've got lots of elements in HTML, and some of them have attributes, parameters, if you like. So there's one attribute, another attribute for the meta element. So you can use speech marks, double speech marks if you like, and there's double speech marks. But also, if you want, you could use single speech marks. Okay, both of them are fine. The browser doesn't care which one you use. So let's begin to learn HTML a bit more. Different ways of learning. One way is to look at the source code of any web page. So here's an example, Wikipedia web page, a website which has lots of general information, encyclopedia information about millions of things around the world. Go to that in your web browser and hit the keyboard shortcut such as Ctrl-U on a PC or some other shortcuts on a Mac, and you will see the source code. And perhaps we'll have a quick look at that right now. So for example, this is the website for Wikipedia. I'd like to learn the HTML from this website, so I'm going to go over to my computer and do Ctrl-U, because this is a PC, and just have a quick look at the HTML code. All right, so this is the source code for the Wikipedia website. I can see things I already know about, doctype HTML, start HTML, the head section, begins, meta tags, titles, all of these things. A lot of them I know already, even though I just began to look at HTML, but some things I don't know. We can't cover everything in this series of videos. For example, HTML, it can have a language attribute. This particular web page is in English language. Okay, we don't have time to look at all of these attributes. You can learn them by looking at websites and looking at the source code of different websites. So here's a header section. If I keep going down, I'll see the body section. I can learn a lot of things by looking at this kind of website. Okay, another way to learn HTML is to look at different HTML editors. All right, there's hundreds of editors, many. Do a quick Google search and you'll find a big long list. So they give you a nice GUI environment, a nice graphical user interface so that you can build HTML, and you can also see the source code that they create. So these editors, they're useful sometimes, especially useful for complementing learning. That's not replacing learning, but complementing your learning of HTML. Let's look at an example. So here's an HTML editor. This one is called TinyMCE, and it actually works inside a web page because this is actually a web page. Okay, and so let's do a quick example. I'm going to type some text here in my little GUI environment, and then I'm going to apply some formatting. I'm going to apply the H1 format. All right, so I'm going to type some text. It's going to be very small. You won't see it very clearly. And then I'm going to add the H1 style, and then you'll see it a little bit bigger, and we can see the source code. So let's do some typing. This is my web page, something like that. Extremely small, you can't really see it. Let's select it and then apply a format. And we're talking about the H1 format. And yes, now we can see that we have a large size of text that is using the head H1 tag. Now, what about my source code? I want to look at the code created by the editor so I can copy it, paste it into my own system. So let's have a look at the source code, and I can access that with this particular menu. So let's click and look at the source code and make it a bit larger so you can see it. And there is my source code. Fantastic. I didn't have to type it myself. H1, this is my web page /H1. I could copy that, put it in my own web page, put it in my own web system if I like. Of course, it's not just the simple things like H1. There's 100 different things you could do with editors, and they'll construct the source code and then you copy it and paste it. Does it replace learning? No, it doesn't really replace learning. You still have to understand everything it generates. Okay, so that's the end of our first discussion about HTML. Let's have a look at a typical editor and how you might use it to explore and develop HTML. For this video, we'll use the Atom editor, which runs on a Mac. There's hundreds of other editors, and on a PC as well, there's many other editors. So this is a typical arrangement. We have an editor on one side and we have a browser on the other side, so we can see the result of what we're creating. So in our editor, we might make some change. Let's change a word such as this and then save it. We have to save it and then over to browser and do a reload. And then, yes, we can see the change. All right. So that's how you might do it. Typical pattern: save from editor, load in browser. Now, some editors can do a more helpful job than that. So let's turn that on in the Atom editor. We're going to turn on a preview function. So let's turn that on. And then within the editor, it shows the result of the HTML you are developing. So let's do perhaps copy and paste something, and then we will see the result immediately. We don't have to wait. We do not even have to save it ourselves. It's automatically done by the editor with this preview feature. Very useful and can save a lot of time. Now, for this particular video, that preview window is a little bit small, so we're going to turn it off and go back to the traditional style of having a separate browser window. Here we are. So let's talk about these colors for a little bit. So these colors are automatically added by the editor. They are not saved in the source HTML file, and they are just showing you where the HTML elements are. Now this is useful. Let's say we make a mistake or we accidentally do something like this. Well, you can see the next tag has been shown in a different color. It highlights that there's some kind of problem. So now your eye is drawn to that area, and now we could fix the problem, and it goes back to the correct pattern of display. So that's one useful reason for having colors. Now let's look at another feature which some editors have: autocomplete. Let's say you want to have a button in your web page. You type BU, and then every element which starts with BU is shown by the editor. In this case, it shows button and also some other things as well. So let's choose it from the list. We choose button. And if you like, we could do closing the tag. And as soon as you close the tag, this particular editor will also add the / button to help you. Then all you have to do is add a couple of words in the middle and save the result, and go over to the browser to see what it looks like, and then you can see the extended web page with the button at the bottom, and you could click on it just to check it works. Fantastic. So this is just a quick video which gives us some quick ideas of why an advanced HTML editor or a general code editor is useful. So now let's look at some common HTML elements. After this presentation, you'll be able to apply headings and sections within your web page. You'll be able to create different types of lists, and also you'll be able to write comments in your code. These are the different elements we're going to look at. So, quick reminder, what do we already know? Well, we've seen this web page and we've talked about this web page. So let's strengthen our understanding. In that web page we've already seen we had H1. So there's actually a range of those H1. There's H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, and each one gets smaller and smaller. So that H1 is the biggest one. So if you go back 20, 30 years, the idea of these H1, H2, H3 was a kind of title of a section. Okay, so that's why this one is bigger than this one, because it's the main part of a report, for example, and this could be a sub part of a report. All right, so there's different visual size, and going back 30 years, they're supposed to have different meaning as well. Less important, less important, less important. I should say not less important, but subsection, sub-subsection, and so on. However, these days, people often cheat by using these elements, H1, H2, and so on, simply to get different size text. Now, that is not what you're supposed to do. That's not the correct way to use these elements. However, it is a quick and easy way to get something bigger and smaller. Now, that means that the original idea of these isn't being used correctly, so they added another element called section, which we'll talk about later. So, quick example, H1, H2, H3, and a paragraph underneath it. Nothing too complicated. What does it look like? Looks like this. H1, H2, H3, and paragraph. Okay, straightforward. And you can see H1 bigger than H2, bigger than H3, and so on. It works. It looks a bit boring, but it works. It's black and white. Those elements are shown using the default style of the browser. Now, later we'll talk about changing the style so things look more interesting. Let's have a quick look at that. So this is exactly the same HTML code. H1, H2, H3, and also a paragraph. It looks totally different. That is using a particular set of style rules, which is shared by this particular presentation. But it's still H1, H2, H3, and a paragraph. So we'll look at how to make web pages more visually exciting and interesting later by using style. So I mentioned before, H1, H2, H3, and so on. They're not really being used in the original way. So recently, HTML have added a section idea. So you just say, this is a section, and then inside the section you can put anything you like, but an obvious thing to do is to put a little title or subtitle, and then some paragraphs or something containing the text in that section. So that's the more common way to handle sections these days. This is what it looks like. In fact, the section command actually doesn't do anything visual, so it's really about structuring the HTML. So let's look at lists. It's another common thing that you often do in web pages. So there's two main tags, UL and LI, and later we'll look at OL. Okay, in this particular slide, UL, unordered list. So we do UL/UL. And then each individual item uses LI, list item. So my first item in the list, second item, third item, all of that goes in UL. What does it look like? It looks like this. First item, second item, third item. Very straightforward. By default, a circle is used on the left-hand side for an unordered list. What about the other type of list? OL. OL, ordered list. And the list items are exactly the same, no change. We just change the structure to an ordered list. And by default, it uses numbers. And so it will automatically increase the numbers, 4, 5, 6, 7, if you use an ordered list. Now, what other things can you do with lists? You could change the start number. Assuming you're using a number sequence, an ordered list, you can actually fix the start number, and then it will increase the number by 1 each time. So here I've said start with 1999. So it starts with 1999, and then each time it adds, just to make a series of years, just for a kind of funny example. So we can fix the start number, and also we can do other things, like we could reverse the list so that it goes backwards. So it's 2002, 2001, 2000, and it goes down. It begins counting down because I added the word reversed. So here it's counting down because of the word reversed. I also, for this particular example, I also swapped the order of those list items. So what else could you do? Well, maybe you don't want numbers, 1, 2, 3. Maybe you want letters. Maybe you want a capital letter, A, B, C, D. Also, not shown here, maybe you want small letter, small a. Okay, you replace capital A with small a. You'll get small a, small b, small c, and so on. So let's use big A, and the result is what you might expect, A, B, C, D, using capital letters. All right, so nothing too complicated, but they're very common HTML. So the last thing we're going to look at is comments. So comments are a little bit hard to type. Less than sign, exclamation mark, hyphen, hyphen. It's pretty horrible. Excuse me. And then we have a comment, and then hyphen, hyphen, greater than. So it's pretty horrible to type this stuff, but when you do it, you can put anything you like in the middle. So here, for example, this is a simple demonstration of using comments, and I can't believe this, and here's my simple list. And so we have 1, 2, 3, we have 4 comments in one single web page. Just useful to remind you some things, or you could change some HTML into a comment by adding this at the front and adding that at the end, and it converts some HTML into a comment, maybe temporarily, and it hides it from the browser. All right, so that's the end of our second discussion about HTML. All right, let's now look at formatting text inside a web page. So that's the focus of this presentation, and we have several elements to help us do it. So let's start with simple things, italic. So italic, as you probably know already, you just do italic to some text, then it will kind of change the angle of the text and make it look a little bit different. So here we have a paragraph, and then inside there a little italic sequence. We also, underneath it, have a paragraph, and then we have an EM sequence. EM means emphasis. Okay, so we've got italic, we've got emphasis. What does it look like? Well, it looks like italic, and it looks like italic. They look exactly the same. In fact, they are exactly the same. So this was I/I, italic. This was EM/EM, emphasis. What's the difference? Well, they're both in the they're both in the HTML5 standard, okay? But italic is just when you want the words to look like that. Emphasis is when it's a little bit more important. They look exactly the same, but one, it could be used for random reasons, and one is for, you should note this. It's more important. That's the idea. They look the same though. Okay, that was italic. All right, let's move on to bold. Something similar with bold. We've got a B and a /B. That will give you bold text, thicker text, right? What else do we have? We have strong/strong. Again, they're both part of HTML5. What happens if you look at the result? The result is bold text and bold text. They look exactly the same. It's really the same idea as what we just looked at with italic, okay? Bold, for random reasons, you might want that text to be thicker and stand out more using bold. But for strong, it's got a little bit more semantic difference. It's trying to say, pay attention. This is an important message. That's the idea. It doesn't look different on the screen, but it looks different when you look at the source code, especially if you were google.com doing a search engine, something like that. That will be more important than that, because it will look at the source code. Anyway, 2 ways to do bold. Let's move on. Underline. So the first thing about underline is don't use it. Okay, it's just too confusing. Over the last 25 years, people used it for different reasons, and people often think, oh, it's got a line under it. It's a link. They try to click on it. It's not a link at all. It's just got a line under it. Very confusing. So personally, I try to never, ever, ever use underline. Okay, if you insist on using underline, well, then this is how you would do it. You would do a U at the start, /U at the end, and that will give you a line under it. If you do use it, you're supposed to use it only in an appropriate situation. So here's underline, where really these days you shouldn't do that. Okay, it just kind of looks confusing. Is that a link? Should I click on this? I don't know, unless I try it. Okay, so I wouldn't do that personally. But if you look at the HTML5 specification, it says, yeah, there's some situations where it might be okay. For example, a Chinese name, perhaps you underline the surname because the surname goes first, unlike the Western system where the surname goes last. Okay, that is a reasonable use of underline. But even there, people may think, wait, is that a link? And they try to click on it. So again, personally, I would avoid underline if possible. Okay, let's move on. What else can we do? Big and small. You can guess what they do. Big is going to make this text bigger than the text around it. Okay. What else? We've got small. Small. That text is going to be smaller than the text around it, which is this text. Okay. What does it look like? Looks like this. Okay. It's dangerous to use big. Now, it may be hard for you to see it, but that word is actually a little bit bigger than the words on the left and the right. Okay. It is bigger. And what about here? Smaller. And again, might be a little bit hard for you to see on the video, but those three words are smaller. Okay? Very simple. Big, small. Some things you've got to keep in mind. Although it works right now in this browser, because this is a browser, actually, big is not part of HTML5. It is not. Okay, I'm lucky it works because, you know, luckily we tried it out this year, this browser, it works. However, next year may not work. It's not part of modern HTML5 standard. So dangerous to use it. Maybe 3 years later, I have a big, somebody looks at my web page, totally fails. Maybe it doesn't show anything because it doesn't know what big is. So dangerous to put that in your system, but you could if you like. What's the alternative? The alternative is something we'll look at later called span and a style rule, but we're not going to look at that here. So there's our big, there's our small. Let's move on. Highlighting text, mark. Mark, you say mark/mark, whatever's in the middle comes up as one of those yellow marker pens, right? You know, you buy them and you go shh, and then it shows it in a kind of nice thick yellow background. Might be useful for some particular reason. What else do we have? Sub and sup, all right? Definitely useful sooner or later, sub and sup. Sub moves the text down, subscript. Sup with a P moves the text up, superscript. All right. So let me show an example of that. So here's an example. This is a little bit of maths. Okay. Now the only way I can kind of get the 1 to move down and the 2 to move down, the 2 to move up, the 3 to move up is using sub and sup. Right. That's how I've done it here. I have to say, although it works, here's the code, right? Sub 1, that will move my 1 down next to the X. And then over here, sup, over here, 3 is going to go up, superscript, sup/slup, moves it up. And over here, sup/sup, 2, that's going to get moved up. So sub, move down, sup, moves up. It works, right? It looks like this. Yeah, I can get some down, down, up, up. I can do some simple maths. However, much better is to use the proper maths language, mathml, which we're not going to look at, okay? Mathml will do a much better version. It will make this 1 smaller, because it's supposed to be smaller. It'll make the 2 smaller. It'll make the squared smaller. Properly doing maths, you would use mathsml. Anyway, it's a nice example of sub and sup, okay? More realistic is this kind of example. You have some text, and then you use it as a footnote, all right? Now, again, there's kind of other ways to do this, but simple way to get things working. Again, you'd have a superscript for your 1, and then over here, superscript 1, and then you have your reference. That's a bit better, a bit more comfortable use of superscript than maths, which doesn't work quite so well. Visually, it works, but it's not as good as it could be. All right, anyway, that is sub and sup. There's our sub, and there's our sup. What else do we have? Well, there's a couple of things which personally I haven't really found a strong use for. Inserted text and deleted text. Ins and del. So the idea is that maybe you share documents through a web page and you want to show that somebody else has deleted something or somebody else has added something, like you're sharing the document. All right, so insert, the word truly has been inserted. That is the message you're showing in the browser. And also del, this word has been deleted. That's the message you're showing in the browser. Looks like this. There's my inserted word. It uses a line to show that it's been inserted, and this word has been deleted. Puts a line right through it. It's really for editors. It's just for editors to show what they're doing in a web page. Okay, that's our quick introduction to some of the things you can do with text in HTML5. Let's have a quick look at using images in web pages. So after this presentation, you'll have a good understanding of how to do that. We're going to focus on the image element and these attributes. So bringing in a picture into a web page is very easy. You just say image and then the source file name. The browser then grabs the picture and then puts it into the web page. There is a picture and this is the web page here. This white area is a web page. The picture is correctly shown in the web page. Now the problem these days is that a lot of pictures from digital cameras, mobile phones are huge. So if you did this, then you're going to get a huge picture in your web page, which usually is not what you want. So you need some control. So there is a width attribute and there is a height attribute. So here I've used both. I've used width and height. I've fixed the size of the picture to 300 pixels and the height to 300 pixels. The result is not very good. Okay, the picture is too squashed because the ratio of width to height is not the same as the original picture. So that is a bad result right there. So the trick is to only do one of those. So here I'm just going to use the width. I'm not going to state the height. Now, because I don't state the height, that means that the browser automatically works out the height, keeping the correct ratio of width to height. So that is much more successful. I just do one of them, browser works out the other one, so it looks correct. I can do the same thing using percentage if I want to. Now, one thing to keep in mind is percentage is relative to the thing that contains the picture. What contains the picture in this example? Well, in this example, it is the body that contains the picture. So the width in this particular example is 50% of the body of the web page. And then the height is calculated appropriately. All right, so there's several things you can do with pictures. We've just had a quick introduction and we'll stop there. Let's now look at handling audio, sound in a web page. That's the whole target of this video. It's just about sound. We need to use the audio element and several attributes. So how can we get sound into a web page? Well, basically audio and then source and then the name of the file and then /audio. Okay, that's it. That will bring in a sound into the web page. What's the problem with this example? Well, you can't hear anything. It'll bring a sound into the web page. It's in memory, but it won't play it. So how do we play it? All right, we have to add a little bit more. We have to add another attribute, autoplay. So as soon as the web page loads, it will load the sound file and then it will play the sound file straight away. So let's check that by running this example over here. Works fine. Okay, I'll stop it now and then we'll carry on. Okay, so, oops, let's forget this little thing here. So basically that was the autoplay. Basically we told the browser, bring in a sound file and then immediately start playing it as soon as the sound file has loaded. All right, what else could we do? Well, I have no control over the sound file so far. I can't restart it or anything like that. No problem. All the modern browsers have audio controls. All right, so that's another attribute. Bring in the sound file, show the user some controls so they can play and rewind and fast forward and change volume, the sound. Okay, so that example is here. It should work if I try it right here. Yep, no problem at all. This is provided by the browser. Okay, that is the controls. I could jump around, jump to the end, change the volume, all of those things. Simple stuff, but I'm just going to stop it right now and move on to the next example. Okay, what else could we do? We could loop things. Okay, we could loop things. Why is that useful? For example, maybe you have a game and it's got some background music and you only have 2 minutes of your background music, but the game goes on for 10 minutes. Okay, then you have your game system like this. You say, start the system, start the audio and keep looping it. Every 2 minutes, it will start it again, if the sound is 2 minutes long. Okay, so keep repeating, might be useful. And we have a simple example here. Loop, loop, and it's going to loop and loop and loop for infinity until I stop it. All right, that was simply the loop attribute right there. Full screen. Okay, let's carry on. What about older browsers? Because those kind of things we just looked at, they were really for most recent browsers, and sometimes some people don't quite have the most recent browsers. Maybe they're using like a mobile phone, which is a few years out of date. It cannot be updated, things like that. So it's wise to do some things kind of specially. One sensible approach is to use MP3 format sound. It's supposed to work in all browsers. It works pretty good on PCs and Macs, but in the mobile environment, it does cause some problems still. But still, that is a good target to start with, MP3 format. And how can you handle these older browsers a bit more professionally? So, for example, instead of it just not working, you can actually get those older browsers to actually show a little message. And the way you do it is like this. This could be sound or audio. It could be actually any HTML tag. So you have this tag, whatever the tag is that you're trying to get working, but you know it won't work on some older systems. So you write the name of the tag, and that will work for the newer systems. For the older systems, they will ignore that tag because they don't understand it, because they're like 3 years out of date. So they ignore this and they ignore this, but they do pick up a simple paragraph in the middle. So older browsers, not very good browsers, not very complete, they'll pick up the middle, but the newer browsers will ignore the middle and they'll just use the start and end. So that's how you handle older browsers. Nothing to do with sound by itself, but actually it's a general method. All right, let's move on. There's an example. So there's sound, and then for older browsers or not very good browsers, not very complete browsers, there's a message. That message will not be shown in the newer browsers. Let's now look at video in a web page. So the whole focus is just on video. We're going to go with the video element and these attributes. So we just want to grab a video and bring it into a web page. We just use the video element together with source, and that tells the browser where to grab the file, and it brings it in, and there's our video. Okay, any problem? Well, just like sound in the previous video, it doesn't actually play the video unless you do a bit more work. So just like sound before, one of the ways we could play it is autoplay. As soon as you open the web page, it will play that video. That's a simple thing to do. Let's try it out. Click on this example, and you can see, yeah, as soon as I open the example, it just played it. So Video, handling video is very similar to handling sound. It's the same attributes, it's the same approach. Okay, let's come back to our presentation. So we've got autoplay, very similar to sound. As soon as it loads in a web page, automatically play the video. We have add some GUI controls, again, really identical for handling sound. You would do this, the browser adds a little panel at the bottom, and then you can control the sound. Let's quickly do it. So it looks like this, and zoom in a little bit. There we are. There's our simple little panel added by the browser, so we can play and forward and backwards on the video. No problem at all. What else do we have? Very similar to sound, we have the other things. So let's look at those. We have loop. They will just loop the video again and again. I'm not going to run an example. It's very obvious. We have alternative text. Very useful for search engines and people who can't see videos, blind people and so on. So very good idea. You are supposed to add alternative text. All right. What else? Well, we could handle older browsers, maybe old mobile phones, things like that. How do we handle it? Same idea, same way that we handle sound. Okay, we have a structure. This middle part gets picked up by older browsers, and then the outside part gets picked up by newer browsers, and it displays the video. So handling video, very similar to handling sound. Now let's look at links in web pages. So, at the end of this presentation, you'll be able to add a link to any web page. You'll be able to add a link to any position within a web page. And also, a little bit of extra, you'll appreciate the role of lorem ipsum text, which you probably don't know about. So we're going to look at mainly the A attribute together with mainly the A element together with lots of attributes which work with it. So links, if you think about it, the main difference between a simple document and the web system that we have, the web pages and everything, is links. So you can start jumping around the world to different documents. 30 years ago, that was the main contribution. Okay, there's always lots of documents. What's the difference between before internet and after internet? Really, links is the key point. So how do we add link? Well, we say A on the left-hand side and then /A on the right-hand side. And then in the middle, we have some kind of text. That text acts like an anchor. It's a bit like you have a boat and then you have an anchor to the bottom. That boat is fixed to a particular position. Similar idea in the world of HTML. We have A/A. It is fixing a piece of text usually, and that is fixed to a particular destination. So that makes it into a link, basically. That text, that single word in this example is now a link. All right. So that's how you build links in web pages. So it looks like this. Okay, make sure you run your Gmail account, and then you click on that, and then it will go off to the actual website right there. Okay, simple to do a link. Now, we could do a link, but it doesn't have to be text. The thing which is anchored does not have to be text. The last example, it was text. But here, we're using a picture. There's a first picture, second picture, third picture, and we're using the images as anchors. Okay, so there's a nice little picture. It's a picture of the Twitter icon. All right, now, if you click on that Twitter icon, it will trigger the link and it will go off to the actual website, twitter.com. Same thing here, little picture, PNG format, picture, doesn't matter what format it is, a little picture of the Facebook icon. That is anchored to a particular destination website, facebook.com. Click on this, off it goes facebook.com. Click on this, off it goes to Google+. And of course, you could do this for 1 million pictures and 1 million websites. Okay, nothing special about these. I suppose we could try it out very briefly. Let's try it out. So we'll open this example here. Oops. And there it is. And let's try out one of them. Let's try out the Facebook one. Okay. So remember, I did this as a link. This picture is an anchor for facebook.com. So click on this. It'll automatically go to facebook.com. Let's try it out. Click, and takes a few seconds, but yes, off it goes to the Facebook website. Okay, so pretty simple to do these links in HTML. Let's come back. Okay, for some reason it's changed the size, but let's ignore that. So what about if you want to do some positioning inside a web page? Maybe you have a big long web page and it has section 1, section 2, section 3. You want to jump straight into section 3, not the top. You want to jump right into the middle. So the way to do it is you add an ID. So an ID is basically a name to some kind of element. You add it to a paragraph, perhaps, and then you have your link structure, and your link structure uses hash, and then the name of that you've used, the name, the ID name, okay? So this would be within the document. In this example here, within the same document, I want to jump, when I click on go here, I want to jump to this thing, whatever that thing is. It could be a paragraph, header 1, header 3, whatever it is. It's got a name. I add the name, I add this text, click. Okay, it will jump to that position in the same web page. All right, let's do a quick little demonstration of that. So let's open it up. And what I have here is lots of text to quickly demonstrate it. And I've added the destination right here at the top, and then right down at the bottom. Let's go down the bottom, and there's lots of text which we can't read, but that's fine because I don't want to read the text. I just want to try out my linking. Okay, lots of text, and then here is my little link, and within the same web page I can now jump. Let's try it out. Click on that, boom, and it goes straight to the top within the same web page. Okay, so that works fine. Now let's just do a couple more things before we finish. So what about if I want another web page and I want to jump right into the middle of this web page? Okay, so I'm in another web page somewhere else on the internet. No problem. I do exactly the same idea. That's the location within the web page. I just have to add the exact location of the web page. Possibly I have to add the server if it's a different server, maybe a subdirectory. But the basic idea, you add the web page source location as well as the exact location inside the web page that you want to jump. Okay? And that will jump you right into that location in that web page. So that's the idea of jumping around in different web pages. Now, finally, I thought it might be interesting just to look at that funny text that we saw. So that funny text that we saw is called lorem ipsum text. Now, that might be quite useful depending on what kind of application you're building. And it's very useful for temporary text. You don't really want to read it. It's in Latin, okay? It's got a special name, lorem ipsum. It's like 2,000 years old or something. And, you know, there's only like 2 people in the world who can read it because it's in Latin. But very useful to have that text as temporary text so you can start jumping around, fill it in your system, whatever system you're writing. And so this lorem ipsum idea is very, very useful. So what you can find on the websites, on the internet, is lots of ways to generate that text. You can actually copy it. This is just a random website, nothing special about this one. Google.com, search for lorem ipsum. And then this one will actually generate different types of kind of random Latin text. Okay, so I say, okay, give me a few paragraphs, a few words. Here we are. And I said, build me 5 paragraphs of lorem ipsum text. Great, I can copy this, grab it, put it into my own system as nice temporary text. The advantage of this type of text is no one can process it. You don't get distracted. Your brain automatically kind of filters it out. So that allows you to concentrate on everything else because you're not kind of like reading the news from yesterday because you can't read it. So it doesn't distract you if you use this text. Okay? So that's the general world of lorem ipsum text. Okay, let's look at void elements and some examples of that, particularly breaks. So after this presentation, which is a very quick presentation, you'll appreciate what a void element is And also you'll be able to differentiate between 3 different types of break and also use them. So elements we're going to look at, 3 different types of break. Come back to that in a minute. First, make sure we're clear about void elements and what they are. So all of the elements, the HTML elements we've seen so far, they all had this structure here, basically start tag and some kind of content and then some kind of end tag which matches the start tag. Okay, so we've seen that many, many times, lots of videos. Now, what about void elements? Void elements do not have this middle part. Now, because they don't have this middle part, that means they don't need an end tag, right? So that's gone for these void elements. Also, it doesn't really make sense to call the first tag a start tag because it's not really starting because there's no end. So you would just call it a tag, okay? So basically void elements, they just have a tag and that's it, all right? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. They must not have an end tag according to the latest HTML specification. All right, so you only have one thing. An example we've already seen, this one, we put this in our header part a few videos ago. And we said, okay, give this information to the browser, the name of the person who made the browser web page, and so on and so on. We've seen that before. That is a void element. That's the entire element. There is no slash meta later on. No, we don't use any slash meta. That's the whole thing. It is a void element. All right. Can void elements have attributes? Of course they can, right? There's an attribute there, there's an attribute there. No problem with that. It's simply they do not have a closing tag. All right, so what other examples have we seen? We've seen image. We discussed that before. That's a void element. And a bit later, we're going to look at input when we talk about handling forms. It's a void element. And right now, just to kind of strengthen our understanding a little bit, we're going to look at 3 types of break, which are all void elements. All right, so let's have a look. We've got 4 paragraphs. All right, in this example, 4 paragraphs. They're all exactly the same text, exactly the same. This first paragraph has no special tag at all. Second paragraph has a break tag, BR. Third paragraph has a WBR tag. Fourth paragraph has an HR tag, right? Element, I should use the word element. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3 types of element being used. So what does it look like? Let me show you by opening it. Okay, so this is the example. We've got 1, 2, 3 paragraphs we're going to look at the start. First paragraph, nothing special. Second paragraph has a BR, a break. The break is here, right here at the end of the first sentence. We told the browser using BR, we said, okay, go to the next line and then carry on. Okay, so that's BR, and you can see, yes, nothing has occurred after the BR tag, which was here. Third paragraph is using WBR. So what's happened with WBR? WBR is a kind of optional break. So if we look at our first paragraph, we have this huge long word, and there wasn't enough space to show the huge word. So the browser put the huge word on the next line. It's the best thing it can do. Now, what about here? That was just BR, so it does the same thing. That's me forcing a break, nothing special. But here we have something special, WBR tag. So I put a WBR tag right here in the middle of that word. It's a big long word, and I put WBR here. So the browser said, okay, I don't have enough space for the entire word, so there's WBR. Okay, no problem. I'm going to show the rest of the word on the next line because I put the WBR tag in. Without the WBR tag, it would do this, right? It would just put the entire word on the next line, and it leaves a big gap here, probably not what you like. Okay, so that's the idea of WBR, and BR is just simple, just forcing the break. Okay, now to illustrate this word, this example a bit more, I'm going to make the web page a bit wider, and you'll see that the entire word will be shown once again. So let's do that. Let's come over here, make the web page wider like this, and it's put the entire word once again back on the same line because it doesn't need to break it, right? WBR is right in the middle only gets used when it needs to use it. All right, so there's BR, there's WBR, we've discussed that. And then the final type of break is HR. So HR, it used to mean a horizontal rule. So here's my paragraph. Right in the middle of the paragraph, I've said HR. Use the HR element. And so it put a horizontal rule, a kind of line right across the page. Now these days in HTML5, they don't call it horizontal rule, they call it thematic break, which means that you have something and then you're going to discuss a new type of thing. So you put a big line there using HR and then you carry on with a new theme, okay? Doesn't really matter what it's called, it just makes a line like that right there in the middle. Okay, so that's our brief exploration of void elements and 3 of them. All right, now let's look at style. So after this presentation, you'll appreciate the concept of style, particularly with HTML, and also you'll know how to create different types of style rule for use with HTML. So we're going to look at all these tags and attributes, but let's look at them one by one. And also we're going to look at some style properties, but let's do that a little bit later. So basics, style. What's it all about? Well, we need style. You've got to have style in your web page. If you don't, your web page is extremely boring and people go to some other website. Okay, so style is the kind of visual component of a web page. In the world of the internet, the way you handle style is through CSS, cascading style sheets. So the basic concept is like this. You have your information, and the style is really a kind of separate set of information, a separate set of rules, and you add them together and that gives you your visual output. All right, that's the basic idea. So if you want to think of it in terms of files, you could say that is one file, that is another file, and that is the result you get in the web page. However, that is a little bit simple. So we're going to do style sheets. We're going to talk about that. Let's say you had a big website and the website has lots of web pages. What you could do is create one single style file, okay, CSS file. That CSS file could be used by the first web page in your website, the second, the third, the fourth. All of the web pages in your website could use that set of style rules in that file. Okay, now if you do that, that means all of these web pages in your website all have the same look and feel. They all appear to be the same, they use the same colors, background, spacing, all of those things, so that the website as a whole feels like an integrated entity. Okay, so that's a common way to handle the design of a website. So let's look at the code to do that. Basically, we have our web page and the things are similar to what we've done before. We have a header, we have a body. The body contains the visual things that you see. But now in our header, we add a link to a style file, right? Link href equals, and then off it goes, tells the browser to go and grab that file and add the style rules into this web page. So that's what we do, and then these rules in here can use those style rules. Not these rules, these elements, I should say, can use those style rules. So here's a more precise example, linking off to a particular file. There we have some particular elements, nothing very complicated. Header 1, paragraph, header 1, paragraph, nothing very advanced. Now those, usually they will look like black text on white background, but because we're using some style rules in this file, and let's look at the style rules in that file. Very simple. Header 1. Every header 1 in the web page is going to be purple text. Every paragraph in the web page is going to be blue text. That's the rules we put in that style file. Okay, so the final result, putting them both together, is this. Very simple. We had 2 header 1s, if you remember the source code, and we have 2 paragraphs. Okay, the 2 paragraphs are blue, the 2 header 1s are purple because of our style sheet file, which we had here. Okay, every header 1 purple, every paragraph blue. All right, so it's worked fine. That's the actual result. All right, now, so we looked at color just now. We set the color of something. What else could we set? Actually, there's hundreds of these parameters. This is just a few. These are commonly used style properties for text, really, okay? And so we've got color for the main text. We've got background for the background color of anything. We've got font family for text font, right? Different types of font, Courier, Arial, all those millions of different types of font. Size, control the size of the text. And also, where is it going? Left side, right side, middle, all of those things, you would control them through style, the right style rules. Okay, so we saw before an example where we used a style file. An alternative is you don't use a style file. Instead, you write the rules right there in the web page at the top in the header part. Right? Style rules go here, and then your HTML elements go here, and of course they will use those style rules. So this is an alternative approach. You do not have to put everything into a separate style file. All right, so this is an example, style inside this web page. There's the style rules, header 1, paragraph, and there's my actual HTML elements. And so header 1 is going to come out purple, paragraph is going to come out blue. It's exactly the same example as before, but now we're putting the style rules at the top of the page. What's the result? Exactly the same as before, purple, blue, no change at all for the visual result. So one of the things we could do to use style is use a special ID, a name if you like, for an HTML element. Okay, so if I said, all right, I got a list item, I'm going to give it a particular name. The name is red. Another list item, the name is orange. Next list item, yellow, and so on. So I could give any element, doesn't have to be list, any element in a web page can be given an ID, okay? Don't think this is related to lists, it's not. Don't think that the name has to be a color. No, that's just this particular example. I'm just illustrating. You might want to use some suitable name of an element which reflects how you use style a bit later. You could use the word like car. This list item has an ID car. This list item has an ID happy. This list item has an ID India. Whatever you like, you can use the name for any item. Now, why do we do that? Well, this is what happens when we don't apply any CSS so far. This is just a simple list, nothing clever. The ID thing hasn't changed anything. It hasn't added any style, all right? This is what we see so far. And then how do we use our CSS? Well, we would use it this way. You put the name of the element which you want to apply the style with a hash in the front of it. Okay, so whatever the name of it is, like, India or car or green or whatever it is, you put the name there, you put hash in the front, and then you say what visual parameters you want to use. Okay, so it's another way of using style. Based on the name of the element, you can apply a style. All right, so a particular example here. We've fixed up some names and given them styles for those names, all right? And so these are for those list items that we just saw. And also one up here, rainbow colors. We're going to use that for the background of a big list. Okay, so we've got different style rules, and then we're going to use those rules. This is exactly the same as what we saw before, but now we are applying our style rules. Okay, so this thing here, red, is going to use this here. Red, background, red. That is going to be applied to that list item. Okay, what about rainbow colors? Rainbow colors, style rule here, background color gray. What is that going to be applied to? That is going to be applied to the entire list. The background color of the entire list will be rainbow colors, which is actually just gray. All right, what does it look like? It looks like this. Okay, there's the background color of the entire list. There's the style color of the first list item, style of the second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, and so on. Okay, looks very pretty. We have used the background property of these list elements. What exactly you want to do is up to you. How you use these style rules is up to you. This is just an example, just to show some kind of pretty things. All right, now another way to handle style is to use class. And simply speaking, the idea is you make your own rule and then you apply it to anything. One rule can be used for multiple things. All right, so here's an example. Basically, you put a full stop at the front of the name of the style, okay? .zappy. And then you define what it's going to look like. .wow. And then you define what it looks like, okay? And then how do you use it? Well, you have your element, and then you say class equals, and then the name of that thing that you wrote at the top, okay? Header 1 is going to have the zappy style, okay? What is the zappy style? Okay, it's purple and yellow background. Okay, paragraph, it's going to have a wow style. What's that? Oh, that is blue color text and light gray background. Okay, so some of these have zappy style, some of these have wow style. All right, what does it look like? It looks like this. It's up to you to choose the colors and how things look, but this is just illustrating our class example. So this one here and this one here, they both had the zappy style. Okay, and then this one here, they both had the wow style here. All right, what else could we do? Well, we could define lots of classes and then use them suitably. So for example, here's a whole group of classes: zappy, spicy, wow class, LOL class, lots of different classes. Doesn't matter what they are, it's your choice. Use any word you like. If you're doing class, just remember the full stop in the front, and then you can use them. Now, what we're showing here is one element can use two different classes at the same time. Okay, so the first paragraph is going to have zappy style, and it's also going to have wow style, both together at the same time. Okay, so it's going to have blue color, and it's going to have background color, lime color, which is kind of green color. Okay, blue, green. That's going to be the first paragraph. Let's check the result, and the result looks like this: blue on top of green. Right, so it is correctly using these styles, whatever styles you want, by using this class method, which requires you to put a full stop in front of your name. Okay, so you can have as many of these little classes as you want. It doesn't have to be two, as many as you like, depending on what you like. And they all get added together. They all get used together. All right, that's an ending of our discussion about style. Okay, let's have some more discussion about style. So basically, after this presentation, you'll understand inline style and pseudo classes, and also a little bit about which rule has more priority than other rules. These are the pseudo classes we're going to look at. So first thing, inline style. So inline style is when you type the style that you want to apply right there for that particular element. So for this particular paragraph, we want to say all the text will be on the right-hand side. That's what we're saying right there. So that is inline style. So that's very different to what we've talked about before. Before we talked about putting style at the top of a page, and this is really the opposite. This is saying, no, I don't want to put it at the top of the page. I want to put it right here for one particular element right there. All right. So it's harder to manage because you have to go through all the code and try to work out which inline style is being used if everything is not at the top in the style section. So it can be a bit more troublesome. Here's an example. This has a list, unordered list, and we have 4 list items in the list, and we have a style rule at the top which says every list item is going to have a yellow background. Okay, no problem. 4 list items, they will all have a yellow background. However, down here we said, no, I want to apply this inline style to the 3rd list item. So because we've said this is a higher priority than this. So this one will indeed be in purple and all the others will be in yellow. So we get a result like this. Yellow, 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 but then we said inline style for the third list item, so it's purple. It has a higher priority. All right, let's talk about another thing. Context control for style rules. You could have a rule which looks like this. And it says, all right, list items, those will be red color. But what it actually says is list items which are within an unordered list. Those list items, no other list items, will be red. All right, so list item inside unordered list, red. Any other list item will not be red. So here's an example piece of code. We've got a list and another list. This one is an unordered list. This one is an ordered list. And then we've said up here a rule. So we've said list items in the unordered list, that's the first list, they will be yellow. Now that will not apply to the second list. So here's the result. You can see the style rule has not been applied to the second list, but it got applied to the first list. Let's look at another subject, pseudo classes. So pseudo classes are basically classes with what I tend to say is some kind of intelligence, some kind of extra capability. So here's the first one, and it is hover. So it's saying when the user puts their mouse over heading 1, it will change to red. So put your mouse over heading 1, the color of the text will become red. Move your mouse away from the heading 1, it will go back to the previous color. So that's hover. So it's some kind of intelligence, if you like. Now there's a lot of these pseudo classes, many of them. So let's just have a look at a few of them. So for example here, if you have a link, then that will be red color. All right. Now that applies to A because actually that's what a link is. So it has to be A. Remember A, anchor. So any link will be red color. What about here? Visited. That means that the person who is using the browser, if they have visited a link and the link is shown on the web page, then you can fix up a color. So again, that has to be for A because A is for links. So anything that you have visited will be shown in red color. Active. So active means you are currently following the link. You're currently following the link. Now that could be just like 0.1 of a second. You've clicked on a link and the browser is just going and grabbing the next web page and building it, and then it displays the link. It could be very quick. Even though it's very quick, there is a pseudo class for handling that. You're currently following and grabbing the next web page because you clicked on a link. All right, it will apply this style. And again, that has to be for A because it's all about links. What about this one? Well, this one doesn't have to be for A. This is pretty straightforward. This is any element which is empty. It has nothing inside it. All right, it could be every paragraph which is empty. It will use this style rule. So this is just 5 of them, but there's actually another 20, 30, 40, a lot more pseudo classes. So here's an example, and we've set up these rules that we just looked at, the pseudo classes, and then we built a simple web page to explore them. And then it looks like this. And so we can try some of these out, but some of them, remember, are quite hard to see. So let's go for the hardest one first. Remember, the hardest one is the active link. Okay, that is the link that is currently being processed. Maybe hard to see. Purple. So active link, it will become purple. So let's try to open the example and then we'll play with it and try these out. Active link will become purple is the first one we'll try. So here's the example. Let's try that first one. Active link should become purple, but you may have to be very quick with your eyes, but let's try it. There's 4 links here and a series of lists here, one single list with lots of list items. So let's try the active link. So I'm going to click on this one. And yes, it managed to show that in the correct style very quickly. Okay, so that was active link. What else did we have? We had a link which has not yet been activated. You can see there's some yellow color being applied behind it. And what about if we have visited the link? Well, now we have visited the link, so it's using that style rule as well. Down here, we have empty style rule being used. All right, so this particular list item had nothing inside it, so that triggered the use of that particular style. And then the other thing we used was hover, so let's show hover. So you can see if I put my mouse over these, they change the background color. Okay, a little bit hard to demonstrate some pseudo classes because they have some kind of intelligence, if you like. But yes, you can see mouse over has triggered the different style. So that's our brief introduction to 3 different areas of styles, including this one, which is pseudo classes. All right, let's discuss tables. So, very straightforward. At the end of this presentation, you'll be able to construct an HTML table. So, HTML tables, they've been around a long time, basically since the start of HTML, and they're the traditional way to get some kind of structured layout in a web page. To do this, several different HTML elements work together. These are the tags we're going to look at, the elements we're going to look at. Let's start looking at them one by one. Also, we're going to work together with style properties. From the last video, we know that style is the way that we handle different visual elements, and it's the same thing with tables. We need to handle these style properties. So, we want to do a table. Obviously, a table goes in the div area where everything that you see goes. And your basic table structure looks like this. You've got a table/table, and then inside the table, you've got a header area and you've got a body area, okay? But just to make sure it's not confused with the main header and body area, we have T-head and we have T-body, okay? T-head, T-body. Inside the header part, we have a series of cells which are inside a row, okay? So TR is table row, and then over here, finish the table row. And then inside our table row, this is the header column, the very first column, which explains the meaning of all the different columns. So we have a single row, and then we set up the different cells inside that row. First cell, second cell, third cell. Okay, these are the column. We'll see an example in a minute. That is the header, and then we have the body, and this is where the actual main content is. So we could have many, many rows, one row at a time, and each row is usually created using lots of boxes, the same number of boxes in each row, usually. Okay, now when I say box, that's what TD means, right? This one single box in the table. TD, table data. Okay, so one box there, another box, another box. This has 3 boxes in each row. Okay, same thing with the header, explaining the meaning of each column. They're going to have 3 boxes as well, except it's not TD here, it's TH. All right, now if you kind of put it all together, you're going to get an example, something like this. And so there's our header row. Skills, difficulty, my level. So that's 3 columns being constructed. And then into the main part of the table, the body part, we have 3 rows in this example. And just like the header, we have 3 boxes. And that's going to give us 3 columns, basically. Okay, so like we said, TR for each single row, TD for each box, except in the header, where we use TH, TH, TH. What's the visual result of this example? This, right? There we are, nice table. Column 1, column 2, column 3 is done exactly what we asked it to do. Now, perhaps you're thinking, yeah, okay, I can see 3 columns, but there's some kind of, well, it's all crowded together, right? I need a bit of spacing. Maybe I need some lines to show where all the boxes are, that kind of thing. So that's why we need to move to style, so we can handle those things. So what kind of parameters? Well, lots of parameters we could use for style. This is just some. There's many others as well. We saw color before. We saw background before. And here's lots more that we could use. And some of those we'll use now. So style applied to our table. There's a simple table with just 2 columns right there in this example. We want to have it a bit better visually, so we know what to do. We add a style section. Of course, you could add an external style sheet file, but here we're putting the style at the top of the file. And then we're saying, okay, every table data little box, and every table header box as well, they will all be shown using these style rules. Padding, which is a little bit of spacing, because remember the last example was very crowded. And also we'd like to see a line around all those boxes. So that's called a border, and that's how thick the line is, and it's a solid line instead of a dotted line, and it's going to be a black line. Those 3 are applied to the border property. Okay, so that's the first set of rules, and then the second one, just for fun, every single table box in the main part is going to have purple color text. You can change it to whatever you like. So here's the result. Quite nice now. I've got lots of padding, so it's not all crowded together. I've got purple text in the main part, if that's what you want. It's just an example. And I've also got lines everywhere, so I can very clearly see what's happening. Okay, that's much nicer. Much nicer use of a table by adding those style properties. All right, what else could we do? Well, before we talked about classes, and so for any kind of HTML, including tables, we could use class rules. Remember, class rules are when you put a dot in front of an English word. Dot, English word, dot, English word, and then you have your properties, and that basically sets up a nice English word, which you can use, and here I'm using it over here, if you want to. So TD, class equals profit, that's this example here. So I'm saying, okay, for this particular box here with the number 200, I'm going to use this particular set of parameters, light blue background, and the text is going to be on the left side. Okay, what else we got? Another one here, this box here, the class is 0. All right, there's 0. It's going to use these parameters, and part of this example is to illustrate text align. Okay, aligning text to the left, aligning text to the center, aligning text to the right. That's part of this example. So I've done that here, and the visual result is this one, just to illustrate text aligning left, center, right, and also we changed the background color as well. Many, many different things you can do with styles. Okay, I've changed the color of the line, it's green now, and so on. All right, so we've done all those things, and sometimes text aligning is quite important depending what you're doing. So here we have a more comprehensive example. So I've set up 6 classes here. 3 of them here are for the vertical alignment. Okay, so that's this axis here. So I've said, okay, here, put things at the top vertically. Here, put things in the middle vertically. Here, put things at the bottom. And then I've done another 3 over here. And I've said, okay, in the x-axis, put this on the left, put it on the center, and put it on the right. All right, so I've got 6 classes there, together with some other stuff as well. And why am I doing that? To illustrate using multiple classes. So the top left cell, the top left box, is going to use the T class and the L class. What's the T class? Vertical alignment top. That means all the text goes right up to the top. Okay, that's the first one. This one, L, what is L? Okay, in the x-axis, the text is going to go on the left-hand side. That's just the very first box right there. Top left. It is going to put the text, whatever the text is, okay, the text is the number 1, nothing very exciting. It's going to put it on the top left. So I'm combining 2 classes together, okay? So I do that with all of these boxes. We have 9 boxes, top left, top center, top right, middle left, middle center, and so on, just to illustrate multiple classes and also to illustrate the different types of alignment, X and Y, for text. So when we put it all together, we get this example here, just to illustrate those different positions for the text inside TD, inside the boxes of the tables. All right, now, if you find this troublesome, remember you can always jump off to an HTML editor and they will happily create the HTML for you. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to pop over here and just use this particular editor. And let me just use it properly. Insert table. Okay, how many? Well, let's do something like this. Click, and then it has created the structure for me. It doesn't look very good, but that is the structure that I just outlined, a particular number of columns, a particular number of rows. And okay, where's all the lines? Well, we just saw by default that it doesn't show any lines. That's a separate question. But that is the structure right there. And you can start typing stuff in, filling stuff, and then look at the source code to grab the source code and put it in your own system. All right, so let me do that. I'll just type a bit and then I'll look at the source code. So type of things like over here, like, hello, something like that. And then let's check at the source code that I've just done. And we get this. All right, so doesn't look too helpful, but actually it is helpful. Okay, it's put some non-breaking spaces in all those boxes, which I didn't ask it to do, but anyway, it just helps make it a little bit thicker in the display. But we do have the things that we're looking at. Table data, table body, table row. We have all of those things there. Maybe a bit hard for you to see. I'm going to just sort of, try to make it a bit larger. And you can see here, those are the things that we've seen already in the last few slides. Okay, so if it's kind of too much trouble to make it yourself, no problem, just use an HTML editor. Okay, and that's the end of our discussion about HTML tables.